Hello and welcome to the Power of the Truth podcast with me, Fran Willoughby. Today's guest is someone who approached me because they felt the synergy between our opinions was so succinct. I can't wait for you to listen to our conversations. Rather than a story of hope through adversity, today's conversation is one around the subject of truth. She's actually writing a book about the truth. She's extremely knowledgeable about everything to do with the truth and how neuroscience and psychology meet spirituality and the divine. It's fascinating, in my opinion, and I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoy recording it. If you do enjoy the conversation, please do follow and like on social media or wherever you get your podcasts. I'd be very grateful. And if you have any insights or comments or questions, please do email podcast@mojo-motivated.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Mary Beth Thomsen. Okay, welcome to the Power of the Truth, Mary Beth Thomsen. So nice to have you here. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Fran. I'm happy to be here.
Could you please just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you've ended up to be here today?
Sure. So my name is Mary Beth Thomsen. As you said, I live in the United States, down in the South in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a truth teller, which is why we're here today. I am a psychic medium. I am an intuitive life coach. I work specifically with color energy. So that might come up in conversation today as well. And I also practice Celtic shamanic work, and my lineage is from Ireland, so that's why I work under the Celtic umbrella of shamanism. And I'm an empath, and I'm a space holder, and I'm a mother of two young girls who are 5 and 8. I'm married to a wonderful, supportive husband, and I'm excited to talk about today's topic on your podcast. So thanks for having me, because I happen to be writing a book about telling the truth.
Exactly. And that's how you contacted me, didn't you? Sort of out of the blue, really, because the name of the podcast matched kind of the strapline of the book, right?
Right.
So tell us about the book. Where has the inspiration for the truth come from? Tell me.
Wow. So I haven't told the story specifically about how I landed on this topic. So for context, I have been writing my whole life since I was a little girl. As I got older into my adult life, I've written articles in magazines. I've written blogs. I even had a blind dating column a long time ago. So I'm a writer through and through. I love to write. It's like breathing to me. And so I always knew I had a book inside me, but I had a hard time narrowing down what the topic would be. And as I would get older and my experiences would change, I felt like I kind of outgrew the topic of the book at the time. And then probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was listening to Oprah Winfrey interview a gentleman who had been on death row for decades. And he was wrongly convicted of a crime he didn't commit. And in the conversation that Oprah was interviewing him about, she said to him something to the effect of, what was the hardest part of writing this book? And he said, to tell the truth. And something just struck me in that moment where I thought, oh my God, that is so powerful, that telling the truth, and we can unpack this today, is something that is so deeply difficult sometimes for a variety of reasons. And I reflected back on my life and how that has been a through line for me, is in moments of light in my life, both through my, religious upbringing, to being a closeted medium, to, friendships, finances, physical health. I mean, just through and through and through, that there has been this common shared experience, not only with me and people that I've talked to, but as you have a podcast now about telling the truth and the power of that. That's when the book kind of was born in my heart and in my mind, that I knew that this was a topic that I could talk about with a lot of passion and conviction, and a lot of sympathy for the idea that a lot of times we don't tell the truth to ourselves, right? Because it can be too painful, or in denial, and or having a hard time telling the truth to others for lots of different reasons.
Absolutely. So tell us about the book then. So the book, I know it's not been published yet. You're working on it, aren't you? But so what's the title? Do you know?
Unless it gets changed, which I don't think it will be, but right now the working title is called Burn the Ships: The Power of Telling the Truth to Yourself and the World. And so burn the ships is a phrase that the story that I have known it to be for was from, I think back in the 1600s, where there was a troop of soldiers who landed upon somewhere where they were trying to conquer, and they had ships that they had gone to shore on. And I guess the person in charge said, we have to burn the ships. And it was a way of saying, literally and metaphorically, there's no going back, there's no retreating. And so in today's day and age, the expression, and in the context of my book, means burning the ships means our lies. And so burning the ships of where we're holding ourselves back, where we're not being as authentic with ourselves or other people. And so burning the ships, or burn the ships, is the name of the book.
Amazing. So aside from that initial moment with Oprah Winfrey and the chap on death row who had been wrongly convicted, and obviously that sparked something in you that made you kind of, oh my God, and I feel like this is a subject that I have to
Yeah.
explore. How long did it take you to get from that moment to where you are now to writing the book?
Oh
Has this
God.
been a long journey?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I'd probably say over 2 years. So I don't know if you want to get into the nuances of publishing a book or not, but basically when you do a non-fiction book, so a book on the truth, right? Like a memoir or something else, and you want to get traditionally published, you have to write a book proposal, and that literally can take years to write. And so you don't write the book until the proposal is done if you want to get a contract with the publisher. And so that's kind of where I'm at now, is I'm in contract negotiation right now with my publisher. And so I'll be writing the book for the next 6 to 8 months, probably.
Amazing. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
So, tell me, how do you categorize the truth? Break that down in terms of chapters.
So basically just kind of acknowledging that in our day and age right now, with social media and all the filters and the photoshopping, right? So the physical representation of how we put ourselves out there on the internet is so deeply filtered. Plus, people, we call it our highlight reel, right? We're only sharing content for the most part, and I'm generalizing, but that makes us look like our life is all white picket fence and everything's perfect. And that's obviously just not true, right? But unfortunately, I feel like that's the conditioning where we're in right now, is that we want to portray this altered version of reality, right? And keeping up with the Joneses and wanting to fit in and wanting to be accepted, and how many likes did my posts get and things like that. So on top of that, I feel like, because from a very young age, and this is my understanding and my belief, is around the age of 7, we are taught that if I tell the truth, I'm going to get in trouble. That is a very common experience. So it's like, if I, as a very young child, I made a mistake or I did something wrong, and then I'm reprimanded from my parents for it. And so we begin to associate at a subconscious level, if I tell the truth, I'm going to get in trouble. So I feel like it's not our fault, right? We've mostly been conditioned. And so the book outlines why we don't tell the truth, which is because most of the time it's that we're very vulnerable, that we are afraid that we are going to be rejected, we're going to be judged. And so kind of framing the truth about why we don't tell the truth. And then every chapter goes over different parts of our life. Like I said earlier, our mental health, our physical health, our financial health, our social media presence, family, friends, relationships, and things like that. So every chapter, kind of through my own storytelling, through my experiences, plus as a life coach, I have lots of clients who I've dug through limiting beliefs and why they may not be honest with themselves. And at the end of the chapter, there's an assessment that people can take to understand where they fall on the spectrum, to kind of do some deep reflection, to say, where could I stand to be more honest with myself in this part of my life?
That kind of leads into my next question, really, which is that as a coach, you very much blend practical and divine, don't you? Your psychology and your neuroscience background shaking hands with intuition and spirit. So, how does that unique mix help you explore truth in the book? How does that work? Because obviously you've got the sciencey bit and then you've got the spiritual bit. So how does that work together?
Yeah. So if I may just bring in astrology for just a quick second. I don't know
Yeah.
if you're into astrology or not. Years ago, I had my very first astrology reading, and she told me about my North and South node, which is North node Virgo, South node Pisces, which of course are the polar opposites. And it was like my whole life made sense in that moment because Pisces, of course, is a sign that is deeply intuitive. It's a water sign. It's very emotional and sensitive. And so that is me. That is who I am, right? And then your North Node is what you came here to learn. And the Virgo is kind of known to be fact finding and organization and synthesizing, knowledge. And that's how my brain has always worked. And so it's interesting you bring up the question of the spiritual, intuitive part, and then the science, neuroscience part of this is literally feels like how my brain was designed. So I can always see things through statistics and the psychology of why we are the way that we are and why we operate and why we do the things that we do. So that helps me better understand our minds and how we have neural pathways that, you know, lead us to think these thoughts over and over and over again, which then become our beliefs. And then we don't even realize why we think the way we think because it's 80% of the time it's subconscious thoughts, right? So that's just the way that my brain synthesizes information is to understand the why. And then from an intuitive medium psychic energy worker, I have I guess I could say like the lens in which I see the world, I will always see the spiritual meaning behind an experience of why something is happening the way it is. And so I call myself an intuitive life coach. When I went to get life coaching certifications, I always share this story that I was originally going to go see a Tony Robbins workshop experience, thinking I might go down that path. But then it occurred to me, no, I don't think, I mean, of course, I'll take the bits and pieces of the framework of that kind of coaching, but my essence is a light worker. And so I thought it would be nice to blend my intuitive abilities with the coaching. So it's practical, but it's also helping people remember who they are and to know that their answers are not outside of them. So I'd like to think that my book blends that together of how I even just operate as a person.
I mean, I completely resonate because I do exactly the same thing. So I really understand that. And I think for me at the moment, I'm so called by the power of choice, the power of personal choice, and how we use that to create our reality and how everything we do is a choice. And choosing not to do something is as much of a choice as choosing to do it.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so interesting how people don't acknowledge the feelings inside them of the choices they don't make and
Mm.
why they don't make them
Mhm.
because they're so focused on what they're doing rather than what they're not doing. And it's coming up a lot for me at the moment. The power of choice is huge, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're making me think of this coaching model it's literally called the model. And it's when you, as a client or as anyone trying to get around why you're not doing something. So it's like, okay, so for example, I want to lose weight to feel like my jeans are fitting, they're not as tight. And it's like, okay, well, what's the circumstance? The circumstance is that I am overweight. And the thought I have about that is that I think that even if I got up at 5 a.m. to work out, that it's not going to make a difference, right? So the action or inaction that I take is that I don't do anything. I just don't do anything. And so the result is nothing changes,
Yeah.
right? So I love that you brought this into the conversation, that choices also include the choice not to do something and how impactful that is. And so it's this kind of full circle moment to be able to figure out, I say I want something, but yet I'm not doing anything about it. And so when you bring up the idea of choices and how choices are important, both from making a choice to do something, but you're also choosing when you don't do something too.
For sure. Yeah, so important. So, in terms of personal experience, you mentioned that there is a lot for you where truth has been woven throughout your life. Aside from the Oprah Winfrey moment, talk to me about what experiences for you really leaned into this need to tell the truth. I'm assuming you said being a closet medium earlier, so I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's got something to do with it.
That was a big one. So I discovered that had a mediumship ability in my early 20s. And my grandpa, who died when I was 8, who I didn't really have a close relationship with, came into my consciousness. I didn't have language for it back then, but it would be called claircognizant. So just in knowing he was there, clairsentient, I just felt his energy. And clairaudiently, I started to talk to him in my mind and was like, what are you doing here? I was at the gym on a treadmill. I was like, what? And he had a message for me to share with my sister. And again, like I said about writing, felt so natural to me. Mediumship is as natural as breathing to me. That's how natural it is to me. So I ended up passing on the information to my sister. It resonated with her. And that was the moment where I then, I guess you could say, turned on the switch of like, okay, I can connect with loved ones in spirit. And so essentially for the next 20 years, it was a secret in the sense that only my closest friends knew and just a handful of family members knew. And I never, ever dreamed that I would share it publicly whatsoever. And then fast forward to 2020, around the pandemic, right? I feel like a lot of us went through a metamorphosis of reevaluating our lives and, what am I doing? And so I had been in marketing. My professional career was in marketing for 20 years. And I felt like I was getting nudged from the universe to go look into life coaching. And literally 1 week before my website was going to go live for Soul Shines coaching, I had an intuitive nudge that said, you need to share your mediumship abilities. And I thought, no way, Jose. Like, I'm not a life coach. I'm not doing mediumship readings. Is that crazy? But the feeling was so strong that I thought, okay, let me just gently come out of the closet and see what happens. And I posted on my personal Facebook page, and 60 people commented that they would like a reading. And I thought, okay. And so at the last minute, I added mediumship readings to my business. And to this day, mediumship and intuitive readings are the bulk of what I do in my business. And so telling the truth has changed my life in the sense of having the freedom to not care if anyone doesn't agree with this, or if they judge me for it. I find that most people who judge you just don't understand. People sometimes are scared when they don't understand. And it's been very liberating for me and freeing for me to release the concern about, and I love this expression, your opinion of me is none of my business. And so, yeah, absolutely. The power of telling the truth, of my truth, that I am a medium. I didn't ask for this, right? I never even took classes of how to do it. So I felt very in alignment when I was finally able to just not hide it anymore.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and how do you deal with pushback? Do you get much criticism or pushback from people?
Only my mom. Who that's a whole nother story, but she's one of the people that knew I was a medium. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and so it's very layered and complicated because I feel like sometimes the Catholic Church inadvertently is kind of was like a training ground for me, because you light sacred candles, they use special oils, you talk to entities that you can't see, and you trust that they're hearing your messages. Um, all the divine intervention through prayer. I mean, it's crazy to reflect back on how deeply esoteric and magical the Catholic Church is in their practices. So I think my mom was okay with it when it was a secret, when it was just kept in the family. But once I came out to do readings for the public and reach out to spirit on command, whereas before I was always just the receiver.
You're the
You know,
servant, aren't you, in the Catholic
yes, yes,
Church?
yes, yes. So if if a grandma came to me and then I'd pass the information along, I called myself the mailman. I'm just the mailman. I'm just passing it on. But I think things got sticky when I did this as a professional, and now people are paying me for this, and I'm going on command to retrieve these souls to come to me. That was like, oh no, 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 no. Now you're really going against the fray. And so generally speaking, I don't come across a lot of people who push back to your question. But to be fair, I also am a quasi-professional manifester. And I love manifesting. It's one of my favorite topics. And so I have manifested, I believe that truly am really just surrounded both online and in real life with people who are deeply aligned with me, and that it's a reciprocal experience. And so I generally, knock on wood, have been able to keep away any trolls or people who are not in alignment with me.
That's amazing. I think it's interesting that you've manifested the people you're around. You literally found me, and we are on the same page. So it's so interesting, isn't it, that subject of manifestation? And the question is, I guess, how much of it is you've decided that you're only going to be surrounded by people who are good people, like-minded people, and so you actively seek them out because that's a choice that you've made in your brain, rather than I've manifested this and therefore it has happened. But actually you made it happen. And certainly in the case of our relationship.
Yeah, yeah. So let me give you an example. So one of the
Yeah,
manifestations I do, and I'm an angel number nerd. So when I
me
see
too.
1111 or whatever, I will use that as a reminder for me to do a manifestation. And so, everything I do is through gratitude. So I'm not asking for anything. I'm thanking actively, proactively. Thank you for attracting new and repeat clients into my book of business who are energetically aligned with me, and for all the referrals. Thank you for attracting professional collaborations that fall into my lap, and that's mutually beneficial and energetically aligned. Thank you for all the prosperity and money and abundance that flows into my household in ways that are expected, unexpected, and very clever. And so I have this whole thing, and I'm doing it with my hand over my heart, and I'm smiling, and I'm feeling it in my body. And it happens all the time. All the time. It's wild. And so, yes, was meeting you serendipitous? Absolutely. I'm listening to a podcast, you're the guest. You talk about your truth-telling podcast. That's literally essentially the name of my book. You and I hop on a Zoom, and we have so much in common. So much in common. I'm like, "Are you joking me?" So, I believe that that was orchestrated from the universe, from my intention setting. Yeah, I do.
Amazing. I love it. And then you become to think, and this is something my mom actually used to question a lot. She would always say, I wonder if we have any choice,
Mm,
really,
wow.
really.
Uh-huh.
She would say, I wonder if the end point is the end point, and we do have choices along the way, but actually where we end up, we have no choice over that. Or is it that we do have a choice and we can alter it, but there are certain things that have to happen to us along the way? It was a regular conversation we would
Uh-huh.
mull over.
Yeah.
Um, And it is fascinating because we don't know, do we? We don't know which way it works, really.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. But I kind of think that's half the fun of it, is not knowing why or how, but
Yeah.
just trusting. And it's part of that surrender process that we talk about so much in mediumship, that we just have to trust that it is as it should be. Whatever is meant for you won't pass you by, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so if we're getting a bit philosophical, which I feel like we are,
Yeah.
who are the thinkers, teachers, spiritual voices that have shaped your thinking and your truth? Who do you look up to?
I would say the first spiritual teacher that made a significant impact on me is Eckhart Tolle. His book, A New Earth, completely changed the trajectory of my entire life. And I mean that without trying to sound dramatic. I mean it sincerely. Growing up in the Catholic Church, I was taught that you have one life, you go to heaven or hell or purgatory, nothing about reincarnation. We're born into sin. I mean, all this whole structure, right? And so there was something, I think, divinely guided that I was meant to read his book at the exact time I did. I think I was in my early 30s. And it was as if I was reading the truth that I knew at a soul level, but it had just been like I just got the key to reading. Again, this is might sound confusing. It was the truth that I knew to be true, maybe in another dimension or something, because it wasn't the truth that I was taught. But I read it and I thought, "Oh my god, that makes so much sense to me." And so that was like the portal for me to start to second guess or to question if what I was taught was actually true, or is it possible that there could be other possibilities out there. And that was the gateway for me, and I never I never looked back. So I would say Eckhart Tolle has been instrumental in uncovering these other, I'll call them truths, probable truths, maybe. And then also from a psychology standpoint, I absolutely love Dr. Joe Dispenza. So I really like when it comes to, again, like manifesting and the power of our thoughts and how it all works, and the psychology of it and the neuroscience of it. I could probably repeat his language word for word because I've listened to him so much. I've never been to his retreats before. I would love to go to one sometime. But yeah, Dr. Joe Dispenza would be another teacher to kind of bring it all back to like the spiritual side and the science side. I feel like those two teachers have made a big impact on me.
Do you know, talking about synergy, I went to a show, a literary festival on Monday, where they were doing a poetry readings with one of my favorite poets called Donna Ashworth. And I'd never heard of Joe Dispenza before until Monday.
No way.
And the fact that you've just mentioned him, and she's been on one of his retreats.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
There was something else that was said. Have you ever heard of the word Beltane?
Of course. Yeah, yeah.
So
That's a
I've never heard of it until very recently, because the new company that I'm doing some work for makes a cider called Beltane because of a Beltane festival. But I still didn't know the meaning of the word. And then she brought it up and talked about the height of spring and Beltane and all the rest of it. So that when she said Beltane, and bearing in mind I never, and now you've just done the Joe Dispenza, that's a sign for me, because
yeah.
that's the second time now in the space of 3 days that somebody said Joe Dispenza to me. So clearly I need to go and look into his
Yes.
work, don't I?
Yes.
Um,
But and the only reason I said of course is because I practice Celtic shamanic work, and so they very much interweave. They call them fire festivals and different ceremonies throughout the year, and one of them is Beltane. So that's only why I said, of course, only because it's a Celtic tradition.
is it? Okay, you see, I don't know.
Yeah.
I only know because, like you say, this company make Beltane cider, and it was made because there's an ancient farm near where we live that has this Beltane festival, and they made a cider called Beltane for the Beltane festival. And other than that, I'd never heard of the word, and I find it even more crazy that you do know what the word is, because
I know, I know. Well, you had asked me several years ago. I don't know that I could have said I would have known, but yeah, Beltane marks the middle between the spring and the summer, and yeah, it's great.
And well, I know because Donna told us on Monday that it's the point where everything is growing at its most prolific, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Many people talk about truth, and it can get a bit fuzzy, can't it? Because we talk about our truth, you talk about your truth.
Yeah.
So, how do we define that in the context of a book? Tell me, how do you talk about that with authority? Because everybody's truth is theirs to own, right?
Right. I think that's the most important. I think I was just referencing that a few minutes ago. I was saying, it's my truth. It's my truth. I'm not saying it's the truth, but it's my truth. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. So I'm going to read you some definitions. Okay. So a lie is a knowingly false statement told with intention of deceiving someone. Okay. And the definition of vulnerability is to be susceptible to physical or emotional harm. So I think they're connected because sometimes we don't tell the truth because we feel vulnerable, which gives us susceptibility of harm, right? So it's kind of this full circle moment. And I think that again, we could unpack this at nauseum about the different reasons of why we don't tell the truth. And again, in my book, I'm talking about telling your truth to yourself, which I think, frankly, probably starts there, right? It starts there with where am I not being honest about, let's just say, my relationship where I feel like we've completely grown apart and we're no longer in alignment. And maybe I'm not even in love with this person anymore, but I'm not willing to make a change. So I just go along for the ride and I don't say anything. Or maybe I'm in a friendship and my friendship is one-sided, and this one person who I care about deeply never calls me, never checks on me, is always emotionally dumping on me, and I'm always holding space, but I don't feel like she's ever reciprocating that. And that's unbalanced. But I don't tell her because I'm worried she's going to, fill in the blank. My financial health. Oh, I'm in a wild amount of credit card debt, but I'm not willing to face it because if I were to tell the truth, it could mean I might lose something. My physical health, I've put on, and this is a real example, gained and lost the same weight probably 30 times in my life, right? And so the truth of telling myself that, losing and gaining the same weight over and over and over in this cycle, and coming to terms with when I have put on weight that I'm not even looking in the mirror anymore because I'm so ashamed of what has happened. Social media, I don't use filters. That's only because I feel like it would be hypocritical of me to be promoting the truth and then not even looking like I look in real life. So I personally don't use filters.
Yeah.
I have zero judgment for people who do. But again, and frankly, like I said, I don't think it's anyone's fault either. I feel like we've been conditioned, which I already went on that little tirade earlier, so I won't repeat myself. But how am I showing up on social media, and where could I stand to be more honest? So telling the truth, I personally think starts with to ourselves. And then I think once we get honest about where we're misleading ourselves or in denial or just not facing it, then I think kind of the second phase would be other people. Like where could I show up in more truth towards other people in my life, whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's to the collective or whatever it might be. But what I have found is that we tend to make up stories in our heads that aren't true. And we also tend to often think about the worst case scenario. And I think some people will be pleasantly surprised that when they actually give it a chance and expect maybe it's not going to be as bad as I'm projecting that it could be. It's like, oh, well, that actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. When I spoke up and told my friends, I'm really feeling like you haven't been supportive of me and it's really hurt my feelings. Instead of biting my head off or wanting to end the friendship, they actually apologized to me and said, I'm so sorry. I'd like to make this up to you. So the power of telling the truth can be transformative if we just give it a chance.
I agree. One thing that popped into my mind when you were talking then is though how we can be affected, especially as children, by what we're told. So, just as a real life example, as a young child in infant school, in kindergarten, I think you guys would say, I was bullied for being a show off, right?
Mm.
Now, I have always been quite a big personality. I went into professional musical theatre. I like to sing. I'm quite loud. I talk a lot. And I can be silly and I do show off and I quite enjoy it. But as a child, obviously, that bit of me, the flamboyance, the extrovert bit of me, because actually I am an introvert, but the extrovert part of me did skip round the hall doing my ballet skips that I did at class, rather than skipping like all the other children were skipping. I was doing balletic skips around the thing, and these, gosh, she's such a show off. And looking back, I can see why they called me a show off. I was showing off, but it really hit me quite hard as a child. And it still affects me because I still think, oh, just be quiet. No one wants to listen to you all the time. There's this subconscious hangover
Mhm.
from being told that so much between the ages of 5 and 11.
Yep.
And like you say, we tell ourselves these stories, but that's something that was someone else's opinion. But when you're a child, you don't understand that, do
Yeah.
you? You don't process that really. What they were saying was right,
Mhm.
and it wasn't necessarily negative, although it was portrayed as negative at the time. So, how can we work through that as adults when we're told something as a child? I mean, it could be anything, couldn't it? It could be you're naughty. I've heard of times when people said, oh, that child's evil. How do we let go of those things that we've been told the truth as children as we become adults? I don't know. I think that's an interesting one to debate.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You were talking earlier about synchronicities and how, Joe Dispenza and Beltane and all that. Ironically, but not surprisingly, tomorrow, the day after we're recording this, I'm actually teaching. I have a membership called The Sanctuary, and the topic of the month is about limiting beliefs and where they started and unpacking where they came from. When is the first time you remembered it? And so it's so funny that you're bringing this up. So yes, I think we all have these limiting beliefs that mostly started in our childhood, just like you just shared this kind of core memory experience where we were told something and we received it as the truth, right? So now it's lodged into our subconscious, and now we go through life through this filter and this little reminder in our brain that we have to hold ourselves back because of what we were told. So I think this is so relatable of what you've shared. What I help try to teach people is to, number one, figure out what are your limiting beliefs to begin with. They could go anywhere from, I can only count on myself. I am not worthy. I mean, unfortunately, that's a very, very common belief. I can only depend on me. Of course, there's lots of financial limiting beliefs that I have to work harder to make money. And so I think just doing a deep analysis of what are your top limiting beliefs. And then once you've identified them, figuring out when was the first time this came into your consciousness, the first time you believed it or you heard it. Identify, and I would do this probably journaling, is how has this played out in your life? So you have your first core memory, but then how else can you remember this playing out in your life? And then what I teach people is to come up with a script of reframing it from the limiting belief to laddering it. So you can't go, I am not talented, to I'm amazing, because you're not going to believe it. So you have to kind of come in the middle and say, it's possible that if I did such and such, that I would experience this. So kind of having an affirmation or a mantra to get you closer to where you want to be. And I know you're smiling because I'm sure you do this with your clients too. And then identifying the feeling in your body of what it is when that would be true. And then lastly, being so deeply conscious of your thoughts, because I said the neural pathways I talked about earlier, that beliefs are just thoughts that we've thought over and over and over and over and over and over again. So you just have to catch it. Oh, there was that silly thought. And then maybe putting that thought into a little bubble and blowing it away. And then saying the affirmation or the mantra that you have rescripted to try to override that neural pathway. And you do that enough times, it's really just about repetition and rewiring or recoding that deep, 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 deep neural pathway. So yes, I think what you have brought up to this conversation is so relatable, and it takes work though. And I think that's where there's kind of the fork in the road is it takes work to change, and it's easier not to change. And that's why we stay stuck in our patterns. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I find it fascinating to hear you talk about it in that way because what you're doing in that work is changing what you believe to be the truth,
correct.
your truth.
Right. Yes.
And 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 that it is possible to change your beliefs about yourself.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that what you believed before was wrong. It just means that you've changed your mind about
Yeah.
something. And again, we come back to the power of choice, about
Yes.
this decision to choose the option of a positive outcome rather than a negative one. And
Mhm.
I just think it's so important to recognize the power that we have over our own minds. And that if you decide to change your mind about something, it doesn't mean you were lying before. It
Right.
just means you've changed your mind.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's such an interesting line to cross, isn't it? Where
Mhm.
the lies we tell ourselves, the truths we tell ourselves, how we justify things. You know, I know someone, she could justify anything to anybody if it was something that she wanted to do.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And she'll have a justifiable reason for why it's okay, even though it isn't. But she'll
Uh-huh.
find a way to
Yeah.
make it justifiable because it's what she believes
Right. Right.
and it's what
And
she wants to happen. So she then makes it happen and then wonders why it all blows up in her face. But it's so interesting to watch. And once you start to think about it and analyze people, analyze situations or the way people's behavior, I should say, not analyze people, but analyze people's behavior, it's very interesting to watch, isn't it?
yeah, it is. And I'm really fascinated to hear your story because as you were explaining that people projected this belief onto you or this observation that they made, and you took it as a child as the truth, right? And yet you're able to identify that there was some truth to that. Yes, I can be a little bit loud. I can be a talker. I actually was showing off. That is true. I mean, so there was truth to what they said, but then it's the framework, I feel like, of what do I believe this to mean? And that's where things can get frayed because it's like that I am naturally confident and I'm talented and God made me to be this shining, vibrant light, or I'm too loud, I'm too gregarious, I'm too confident. Okay, now we got to bring this down. So I think this is so fascinating to overlay this with the context of the truth, your truth, their truth. It's yeah, it really is so fascinating.
It is fascinating because the people who were telling me I was a show off, they just didn't know what to do with me. And that
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily their fault. I was something else. I wasn't doing what everybody else was doing. And naturally, as humans, we try to fit in, we follow the crowd. And I wasn't. I was doing my own thing. I was running like Phoebe through the park in Friends. Have you seen that episode? I love it.
Yes,
I
yes.
love that.
Yeah.
And it's that thing about not caring what people think
Yes.
and
Yes.
having the confidence of your convictions just to just be who you are. And I remember it like somebody's taken a picture and put it in my mind because I am clairvoyant too, so I definitely think in pictures. And I remember that moment of skipping around the hall and listening to like, oh, she's such a show off, you know, and and it did dampen me down for a while, but I soon realized that that was a superpower for me,
Yeah.
my confidence.
Yeah, yeah. There's a quote. His first name is Charles. I think it's Bukowski. He said, "Can you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be?"
Yes, I love that. And I do believe that everybody's truth is their truth, and that's fine. But you just have to have the confidence to know who you are.
Yes.
And if you're okay with that, if you're okay with, then like you just said, what was the lovely thing you just said? Your opinion of me is no one else's business. Was that?
Yes, yes. Your opinion of me is none of my business.
None of my business. Yeah. And that's it really. But it
Yeah.
does take a certain level of resilience and confidence to be able to say that.
Yes. Yeah. And I couldn't have said that 20 years ago. I'm in my late 40s now, and yeah, it's taken a lifetime to get to this point. But I really have appreciated this conversation about telling the truth in the lens of limiting beliefs and who told you that and why is that true and how is it true to you, and just kind of questioning, is this true and do I accept this or not? And yeah.
And even if it is true, does it
Mhm.
mean what you think it meant, or does it mean something else?
Right.
Because you can reframe it.
Exactly. I love a reframe.
So, just to go back to the book a little bit. So, when you're writing your book, obviously, we know that you're coming at this from a neuroscience background, you're coming at it from a psychology background. But when you're actually writing, how much does your spirituality and your divine messaging come in? Do you channel when you're writing? I'm interested.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I would say yes. I would say yes. I feel like maybe inspired writing through my intuition is how I would say it. And yeah, I definitely feel like this is a spiritual journey, because the truth is I I am sharing things in my book that are deeply, deeply embarrassing and things that I'm ashamed of. And there are things my husband doesn't even know that are going to be in the book that he's going to be like, "Oh, wow, okay." So, I mean, this is almost a coming out of the closet in my own right by sharing this book. And I have been a truth teller for a very long time. Remember back when blogs became very, very popular? I don't even know when that was. Maybe that was like
I
2008.
still have a blog. I like to put things in my blog.
But
We're the same age. Like,
I know, I know. But I guess just back when blogging first became very popular, and I wrote a blog, and I had so many people, mostly women, reach out to me and say, Mary Beth, me too, me too, me too. And my husband, my boyfriend at the time, would kind of, I think, feel a little bit taken back to be like, wow, Mary Beth, you really just put it all out there. But I felt like not only was it cathartic for me, but I'm holding space for other people who feel the same way. They've just never said it out loud, or they've never acknowledged it. And so that's part of my goal in this book, is to help people feel less alone and less shameful, and feel hopefully then more empowered to get more honest.
yeah, it's interesting. I've had the same conversations with my husband about this podcast
Mhm.
because he listens to them all, and he said, that was a bit close to the bone, and I'm like, well, it's about the truth. I've got to tell the truth, you know.
Course, when I tell people my book topic, I'm like, yeah, it's not, warm and fuzzy. It's a very serious topic. However, I can be very self-deprecating, and I try and have a sense of humor. So in my book, I'm also trying to have some laughs along the way, and have a sense of humor about a pretty serious topic.
I agree. That's exactly, yeah, we're on the same page completely. So you said that there is some shame for you around some of the chapters. Can you share a little bit about anything? I don't want to ruin the expose, but what kind of topics are we talking about here?
Yeah, well, some of the mental health chapter, I really go into my story as a new mom with my first daughter, and I had postpartum depression. And that was a secret. I didn't really share that with many people at all. And when I did confide in some people, they told me, oh, either I had it, or they said, I think I had it. Because a lot of women are not never even diagnosed. And I thought, my God, like, why don't we talk about it? Why don't we share so it's less isolating to say, I mean, postpartum depression is just wild. And so I share stories about things that happened during that time period. Yeah, like I said, that were super, super shameful. And I'll tell you one story. My daughter was on the changing table, and when they don't want their diaper changed, you hand them a rattle or a brush or something to keep them busy. And so I always had strategically things around her so that I could hand her something just to get through the diaper change. And I guess there was a bottle of infant Tylenol that was within arm's reach, and I didn't realize it. And you know how they have the childproof locks on top?
Yeah.
Um, Evidently she's like a magician because she opened it within a matter of, I mean, probably 10 seconds from me turning around to go grab a diaper, get the wipe, turn back around. She had opened it and guzzled half of the bottle. And so, of course, I freak out. I end up calling a toxic hotline. I learned that she had to drink 8 times the amount of that in order for it to be, which was shocked me. I was like, oh, thank God. But I was so embarrassed and I was so ashamed that I allowed that to happen. I didn't tell my husband because I thought, I don't know. I was like, is he going to think I'm an idiot? Is he going to think I'm incompetent? And I was so embarrassed that I made that big mistake. And that's one of many, many examples of things that, that happens during a very dark period. And when you're clinically depressed, and you can't see straight, I say it's like looking through a lens that's very foggy. You can't think clearly, you can't see clearly, you're not able to. And when you're so isolated and people don't talk about how deeply isolating and sad you can feel, that just exacerbates the shame spiral of when you make mistakes and things like that. So, but
Mm.
again, as I'm telling the story, I'm still weaving in, poking fun at myself for certain things. And yeah.
Yeah, and I also had some postnatal depression after my first son. We were living in a new place. I was very isolated, so I can completely relate. And I think I hid it and masked very well. People didn't know, no one knew really that I was struggling. And it was only once my husband said to me, you need to go and speak to someone about your behavior, because actually I was just really angry. I was
Yeah.
really angry. And I think a lot of that was to do with the truths that I was telling myself, that I wasn't good at this, that I wasn't, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
um,
Uh-huh.
and that I wasn't going to be a good mom, and that actually I think a lot of it related back to the fact that I ended up having a cesarean section. It was quite traumatic birth, my first one. It was all a bit of an emergency in the end. It never occurred to me that I would have to have a cesarean because all the women in my family had just been able to have babies like shelling peas.
Yeah.
They just popped them out and that was the end of it. And I didn't. And it felt like failure. And I was angry with myself, I think, about that. And so the truth I'd told myself was that I'd failed at that, you know, but it wasn't true. It didn't matter. Of course, I had a healthy baby. He was perfectly fine and brilliant and beautiful and clever and I was doing a great job. But that wasn't the story that I was telling myself at the time. And
Yeah.
until I went down and sat with the doctor and spoke to him about how I was feeling, and said, I just feel so angry, and got some support, and then things got better. And even just talking about it with someone made things better,
Yeah.
making it tangible, making it a real thing. But again, I don't think maybe a handful of people know that about me. I mean, now more people will know that about me. And thankfully, my husband could say to me, we're not carrying on like this. Oh, you need to go and speak to someone about how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Um, because yeah, I wasn't right. I knew I wasn't right, but the worse you feel, the deeper, darker the spiral of shame becomes, right? So we
Right.
just dig ourselves deeper and deeper into a hole.
Yeah, 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 definitely. And I'm glad your husband said something. For me, and I actually tell this in the book, I had a sty in my eye. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
A little infection. The only reason I got diagnosed was because I went in to get medicine for a sty. And I was 6 weeks postpartum. And in America, they make you fill out a survey of mental health questions. And I answered them mostly honestly, for the most part. And they came back and they said, you have moderate to severe postpartum depression. I was like, what? I mean, I just came in to get a sty medication. And I was like, oh, really? I didn't know that what I was feeling wasn't normal. I thought every postpartum mom felt the way that I felt, which apparently was not not normal. So,
Oh,
yeah.
well, well, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, yeah, and I that felt like divine intervention. I felt like the sty was just, the universe's excuse to get me in front of the doctor, right? So,
Undoubtedly.
yeah.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
So, what myths do you think we have about truth and intuition and spiritual knowing?
I mean, I think really the biggest misconception is that we're going to self-destruct if we tell the truth. I've been collecting quotes about the truth for years and leading up to this book. And what is that famous quote? The truth will set you free, but first it'll have its way with you. Or like the Phoenix Rising, where it's like the phoenix gets like burned to the ground in ashes and then comes up even stronger and more beautiful than ever. So I feel like there's this portal of telling the truth that, yes, it might, chew us up and spit us out, but at the end of it, you will feel more liberated, more empowered. And like I said to you earlier, oh gosh, that wasn't maybe as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I think that would be the biggest misconception, I would call it, about telling the truth, is that it's not going to be as gnarly as maybe you've projected in your minds that it's going to be.
Yeah, interesting. Why do you think people are so fascinated with the truth? Because it's a big thing right now, isn't it? We're in
Yeah.
this collective kind of unraveling, I think.
I think a couple things come up for me when you ask this. Number one is, I think back to the book New Earth I talked about earlier with Eckhart Tolle. That's what he's calling this time in our existence, is this great awakening.
Yeah.
Where we're waking up and we're becoming more conscious. And they say that the generation who's being born in right now, like our children, most of them are probably going to be light workers and are here to help rise to the top of consciousness, right? So I think one, it's at an energetic level is why it's happening. Number two is I think we're all freaking exhausted. I think we are absolutely, unequivocally, just beside ourselves, exhausted from the energy that it takes to keep up with the facade. And so I think this idea of telling the truth and being more honest with ourselves and with others is like, finally, I can just relax. And there's another quote that talks about, if you just tell the truth, you don't have to worry about your like keeping up with your lies, right? So it's like it's a lot more liberating to just be more honest. So I think we're collectively just so exhausted and tired that I think it's picking up steam, that it's like this proverbial kind of ticket to getting out of your own jail. It's like, here, come with me. I'm going to tell the truth. And it's like, okay, yeah. Then I can tell the truth too. And so I think we're all just ready. We're ready to be enough.
Yeah, it's a relief, isn't it?
It is a relief. Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I do think, I mean, you talked about the generation, like our children, their generation, they surprise me. My boys surprise me all the time with how self-aware they are and the knowledge they have around things that I wouldn't have even contemplated when I was in my teens. Things like narcissism and gaslighting and these terms that we now have for people's behavior. I didn't, obviously, we knew there was toxic behavior in the 90s, but we didn't have names for it, right?
Right.
And my kids, they are so aware. And it's partly due to social media, it's partly due to the way that the education system now has to work in order to help them protect themselves from all of this stuff that's out there in the world. But everybody's so analytical, and as a result, the children have to be so much more self-aware. So it's no surprise, really, that the young people of today are so much more self-aware and in touch with their feelings and their emotions because they're taught to be. And that's a good thing. I think for us and for generations that came before us, that you are actively discouraged from feeling too much because it made you vulnerable. You just had to put up, shut up, stiff up a lip, get on with the job. You know,
Yeah.
it's so interesting how that evolution is taking place and how, as a result of that, we are also affected because we have to parent differently. We have to consider ourselves and what we think and how that affects our children in a totally different way to how our parents did it, don't we?
Right. Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think the new earth, the awakening, I think a lot of us, I don't know about you, but my observation has been a lot of us are here as cycle breakers.
Mhm.
So, like you said, we're reparenting ourselves and then or parenting our children differently than our parents raised us. And it's a totally different approach, I think. And I think it's not like we did not sign up for the easy class on Earth School this time. No, we didn't. But evidently, as far as I can understand it, I guess we were up for it because I believe we signed up for it. So yeah, we're here to do some really hard work, but I think it's going to be very healing for generations to come.
I agree. And actually, my niece, who's 37, is just about to have a baby. So she's the next generation. Um, and, she talks to me a lot about how she will parent and how that will be different. And, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out because we all know that we have these ideals in our
I,
minds
yeah. Mhm.
before we have our first children. But I genuinely think she will parent differently, and it's interesting to watch. Uh, and that's her truth, and then that generation of children will be different again. Because by that point, by the time her little baby that's born this year is in the world of social media, it'll all be locked down and no one will have access to it until they're older, hopefully. And so
Yeah.
she'll have a much more innocent
Uh-huh.
upbringing than even our children and us who were around for the dawn of the internet when we remember it being invented, which is crazy, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But anyway, thank you, Mary Beth, for this beautiful conversation. I think we could probably go on talking for hours,
Yeah.
but before we go, could you please, if anybody has taken anything from this conversation and they'd like to get in touch or they want to know more about the book, where should they, when it finally comes out? I know it's going to be a while yet, but
Yeah, yeah.
just
Traditional publishing takes a while.
it does. But we're just dangling the carrot here, aren't
Yes,
we?
yes, yes. Yes, this is
Um, so where can people find you and find out more information about you?
yeah, so I would say they can go to my website. My business name is soulshinescoaching.com. They can sign up for my newsletter there. I would say that would be the most active way to stay in touch with the comings and goings. I also am very active on Instagram and I also have Facebook. So those are also Soul Shines Coaching is my handle.
Fabulous. I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. But thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely beautiful. And I am so grateful for the conversation. And thank you for reaching out to me in the first place.
Yes, yes. I'm really grateful that we had this time together, Fran. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome.